Greetings, dear friends. This is Father Joseph Royan, a Redemptress, and a very warm welcome to the final week of the Synod on Synodality. This is not just the final week, but the end of 2 sessions of the 16th General Assembly on the Synod on Synodality. And I have with me our distinguished guest, Fr Vimal Tirimanna, a prominent theologian from Asia, from Sri Lanka, a moral theology professor here at the Academia Alfonsiana and at other universities here in Rome and in Sri Lanka and other places. He's also a member of the Theological Commission for the Secretariat of the General Assembly of the Synod that we just finished on Synodality. He's also a long-standing member of the Federation of Asian Bishops Conference. A very warm welcome to you, Father Vimal.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
A delight to have you with us once again.
Same here to meet you again. Yeah.
Finally, you must be so relieved that after, must be about 3 years, a process that started in 2021.
Exactly.
With inclusion of the people of God in every diocese, a process of the Synod of Synodality through prayer, dialogue, and discernment, and leading to the 2 assemblies that we had, one last year and one this year. And now we've come to the end. And last week, the Holy Father, Pope Francis, finally approved the final document of the Synod on Synodality, a document that runs through 55 pages with 155 paras, which was voted with almost three-fourth majority,
almost,
or 2/3 majority.
At times even unanimous, or almost.
At times unanimous. Father Vimal, take us through this process. Take us through what went through, first of all, in the drafting of the final document.
You want to start with that, right? This document, in fact, Ryan, you are asking a question about the drafting. Of course, the drafting of this particular document, this is the document, it's yet in its primitive form because it has to be printed. Anyway, this is what we got in the assembly. This document itself is the result of this assembly, but it will be erroneous to say that it was produced by this assembly because it was based, as Father Royan was saying very correctly, on a 3-year official process. This is a process. In fact, that's why when people ask me what's the difference between the two, in fact, it's a continuation from 2021. In fact, it was started in 2020. I was incorporated into the Theological Commission way back in 2020, 4 years ago, but because of COVID and other things, it had a jump forward. So to answer your question, it is a process, as we have been insisting all along. So Ryan, in this process, you used in your introduction a very important phrase, basing on the consultation of the people of God. That means everybody, not only laity, even cardinals, bishops, pope, they belong to the people of God. All these people have been feeding in towards producing this document. Now, last year, if you remember, Father Ryan, it was a synthesis report. They didn't want to have a so-called final document because all of us knew we are coming back this year. So it's a continuation of what had been going on for 3.5 to 4 years. Now, you asked what went into this in this assembly.
Yeah.
Of course, like any other synod or synodal assembly, this assembly also had a drafting committee with a member appointed from each continent, not appointed, elected by the group. Let's say Asia elects their own, like that. These people went into the drafting committee. But I was told the real writing was done, it's important to know, because it's about 12 or 14 members. All cannot write. If all are going to write, the styles are different, the genre is different. So there were 3 or 4 people who were really writing sections, the others reading, correcting, giving inputs, etc., etc. It went on. All along the 4 weeks, these people were taking down notes. Of course, it's based on instrumentum laboris. This time also we had that's, if anyone can't understand, it's in Latin, working document for this. That is the agenda. Otherwise, these are big terms, no? So the agenda for the Synod. So the first week we had modules. That document was divided into, Royan, 4 parts. Foundations. What are the foundations for synodality? I think we discussed about them in the earlier episodes with Father Sanjay. Then after discussing foundations in the first week, in the following weeks we discuss relations within the church. Please don't go by the technical term. These are just terms to identify a module. And in the third module was to do with pathways. Pathways means how to achieve this. And the final module was about the places about which we spoke last week. Each of these sections, when we were discussing, whether it's in the minor, what are they called, circoli minori, small groups, or in the plenary assembly, these people were taking down notes. In addition to that, each group was supposed to appoint a secretary and a reporter. In fact, I got appointed twice, elected rather, and we have to report what went on. So all these were incorporated, Ryan. It's not something that fell all the way from heaven. But I think this is very important because your question, the genesis of this document, how did it come? Why I say it is important, Ryan, is on other occasions, when on the final day the bishops vote, only the bishops vote, but this time all of us, even the 70 non-bishops voted, right?
Yes.
And when they vote, when they used to vote, the bishops in the earlier synods, I have been to 3 of them before, not as a participant, but as an observer. Once the bishops vote, they hand the so-called proposizioni, or proposals, to the Pope. And the Pope takes them and writes an apostolic exhortation. It's an official document which is binding. But this time around, Royan, it didn't happen. In fact, I was telling, even in my earlier episodes, if you check them, probably I said the Holy Father will then write an exhortation. But he surprised us all. When it was voted on, just when the vote was over, there was a big, loud applause. And the Pope just said, yeah, thank you for doing all this. Because Pope was always present, except when he had audiences, general or private audiences. Otherwise, he was always present, intervening, listening, laughing, smiling, shaking hands. He was always there. So when this happened, the Pope surprised all of us, because we were expecting him to say, thank you very much. These are the propositions. I will use them and write my apostolic exhortation like all the other popes have done, like he himself has done before. Instead, he says, I now declare, he is the Pope, Supreme Pontiff, that this is official. This has, and there was a loud applause again, it has theological connotations, Ryan, since you're also into moral theology. When he said that, it's an explicit acceptance that this document is part of the magisterial teachings. Perhaps it's not binding, it's debatable, but they are to be taken seriously. Not binding, but they are sort of guidelines, official guidelines. Now, last point, how it came. Last Monday, today's Monday, last Monday, that is the last week of the Synod, on Monday itself, they gave us a draft of the document, which was discussed intensely in small groups, by the theologians, and in the plenary. And finally, we were given the chance to add amendments, what they call in Italian, Italians, modi. I think it comes from Latin modus, So Modi, per aggiungere Modi, to add amendments to the draft. And there were many amendments added. I can't remember, they announced it. The drafting group did a very good job, because it's not easy to take amendments of nearly 400 participants. They took them, incorporated, and produced this final document. Now the point is, they gave us this time, unlike any other time, from Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we debated, discussed, added amendments. Thursday and Friday were free, declared free for the participants, but the drafting committee had to write it. On Saturday morning when we went, we were given a copy of the final document in our own language. Own language means English, Italian, and all these European languages. After we read it the whole morning, in the afternoon, after lunch, we went and voted. And I must say, Royan, almost all the numbers, there are how many numbers you said?
155.
155.
Paragraphs.
All of paragraphs, all of them got 2/3 majority necessary, except one that also got 2/3 majority. Why I say except is the one on women got a huge block of 97 votes against it. But it's passed because it got 2/3 majority.
For the sake of our viewers, we have talked so much about the final document on the Synod or Synodality, which is communion, participation, and mission, which consists of 155 paragraphs that were voted. Maybe most of us want to know what are the key elements in this document that we are talking about. I'm sure some of them would be a greater lay participation, significant structural changes, and also enlarging the role of women leadership in the church. Could you sort of elicit some of the key elements from this document for the sake of our viewers?
There are quite a few key elements. There are about at least 9-10 key elements, and you have mentioned about 2-3. No harm in repeating. I would say, first of all, the concept of the church. It's not anything new. It's a repetition of Lumen Gentium. Church is not hierarchical. Lumen Gentium said it 60 years ago, but we have forgotten that. It's not the hierarchy. When I say hierarchy, if it is a big technical term for some of our viewers, that's the Pope, the bishops, priests, and probably religious. But now, with this document, which is heavily based on Vatican II, it says church means all the people of God, all the baptized. Of course, the priests, bishops, cardinals, pope, they have a unique role to play. But each role is important, as St. Paul would say in Romans 12, like the body of Christ. Everybody can't be head. So there are certain people in the hierarchy who will be heading, leading, but others are to contribute, but more actively. You said also, and that's true, another key characteristic is the lay participation. Hereafter, lay people are not to be considered as servants at the altar or as altar boys. Of course, there should be some altar boys and servants in a priest's house. I'm not negating that. What I'm saying is, till now, lay people were expected only to do what a priest can't do. That's not the point. Rather, priests and the clergy, bishops included, they should allow more lay people to do things which the lay people can do. And aligned to that is the third point, charisms. Each of us received at baptism a certain charism. Some of us are born with certain charisms. Maybe you are a good preacher. Maybe you are a good person to write. Maybe you have a talent to grasp things. Maybe you have a talent to be a peacemaker. Not talent, they are charisms, talents, skills. These are given by the Holy Spirit. So the church is going to harness them and use them for the well-being of the church. Another takeaway will be, yes, in view of that, there is more enhancement of co-responsibility for church matters. Co-responsibility, this is very important. Royan also, I think some clerics were resisting it last year. Even this year I could see from their body language, some of them did not like. Also transparency in the decision making and decision taking. Hereafter, Royan, you are the Bishop of Bangalore, let's say. You can, I'm not referring to the Bishop of Bangalore, I'm just taking him because he's from Bangalore. Otherwise, I don't know much about Bangalore, though I lived there for a long time. Let's say you are the Bishop of Bangalore. There are certain decisions which are within your competence you can take on your own. But normally you are supposed to consult your flock. Listen to your flock, listening. After that, so it's a network in which discernment is a process, decision-making process. Final decision you have to make, like in our chapters.
Yeah.
That's one. But another important thing which I think got a few negative votes, about 20 I think. But what is 20 compared to 360 or so I votes, yes votes? That is to do with evaluations. To evaluate even a bishop. Regular evaluation of a parish priest. Not by other priests, not by other bishops, but by all the people of God. Priests, bishops, lay people, they should evaluate. And also even evaluation of papal nuncios, papal officials. But more so, which I liked very much, in the appointment of bishops, it should not be a club of bishops where both of us are bishops. When there is a vacancy, we get another man who thinks just like us, not against us or anything. He is our man. We groomed him up, put him as bishop. This has been happening regularly in the Catholic Church. So, hereafter, there should be more consultation of the lay people also. And Royan, I don't know whether I said it last year, I can't remember. Normally, who are consulted when a bishop is to be appointed, when a diocese is vacant? Normally?
The other bishops?
No, other
and
bishops?
The nuncio?
Or, no, who are consulted to have these three names or whatever? Normally, as you said, other bishops are consulted, and mostly priests. Giving the impression bishop is only for priests, which is not true. Of course, priests are the immediate collaborators, but he's the bishop of the whole church, whole diocese. So the lay people also should have a say in this. So this is another takeaway. Yet another one would be, the place for women, more involvement of women in seminary formation, religious formation. I don't know, Royan, whether you have that in India. In my part of the world, sometimes, especially in Sri Lanka and other places, this is resisted by some responsible people. Let's say in the seminary, for a woman to be not teaching, that's there in our seminaries. A woman to be in the decision-making body, whether this seminarian should be, formation, that's a word,
That's right.
whether he should be promoted to diaconate or not. Never allowed, even in India and many other places, that's a problem. So hereafter, it is requested that more involvement, particularly of women. And then we have heard, I'm sure in your ecclesiology classes and elsewhere, you may remember, Ryan, universal church, local church. This time, there was a very common tendency to drop, there were some who didn't like it, to drop this universal talk. Because universal church gives the impression a worldwide Roman Catholic church. Others are just satellites. But really the church exists in this church in Warsaw, in this church in New York, this church in Papua New Guinea. So local churches. But now the word used is, but there's also communion of churches. No? So the word used is not, universal is there here and there very sparsely. The word used is communion of churches, which is very conciliar. Second Vatican Council spoke about communion of churches. Also, aligned to that is the misnomer, the wrong way of perceiving that in the communion of churches of the Roman Catholic Communion, which is the biggest Christian communion, only the Latin Church matters. Latin means you are Latin, you belong to the Latin Church, I belong. That's a Roman Church. But there are also Eastern Oriental churches who are in communion with Rome. Syro-Malabar Church, Syro-Malankara Church, Catholic Coptic Church, Maronites, Ukrainian Church. So these also are part of the church. So that has been brought up because often they have been forgotten, if not neglected. I think that's all I have to say about this.
Thank you.
There are so many others, but I just jotted down a few.
Thank you so much, Father Vimal. You know, you mentioned about transparency.
Yes, I did.
Along with that is also accountability, and the bishops to be more listening. And I suppose and I believe that synodality will be the way forward for the way we see the church from now on.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. That's my prayer too.
Because many, after promoting so much of synodality, I don't want to, with one phrase, kill it, but many were as hopeful as both of us are here in the studio when the Vatican II ended. But what happened for 60 years? Anyway, go on.
Coming to, some of the hot button issues that you sort of brought during your course of your conversation, I can recall three. One is about ordination of married men to priesthood. Second would be women to the order of diaconate.
Mm-hmm.
And the third would be on LGBTQ issues.
Mm-hmm.
How did they feature in the draft of the final document? What was the discussion that went in? You mentioned about paragraph 60, which says a great part of that paragraph speaks greatly of women and their contribution to the church. No one contests about it. But in the final line of the paragraph, the openness to women to the order of diaconate.
Mm-hmm. Go on, yeah, I'm listening.
It's been mentioned, it's been inserted into that paragraph.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on those hot button issues?
Yeah, we'll start with that. Certainly, Synod did not talk, although there were interventions in the plenary assembly last year, first synodal assembly last year, about the possibility of women being ordained. This time, we didn't hear it, except, I think, one or two bishops who asked to explore the possibility because in their dioceses they have a scarcity of priests. So they are saying, why not married men be ordained? Why not women be ordained? So a couple of bishops, but it didn't gain ground about ordination of women to priesthood. But Royan, your provocative line was, in the last line of number 60 you said, where's number 60 now? Yeah. Yes. It says, the assembly also seeks modern language in preaching, teaching. It's not the last line, but it's somewhere there. Women's ordination to the diaconate is still open, it says. And it's true.
Yeah.
Why do I say that? This synod, officially, it's an official document now, it did not close the discussion of that. Not to women being ordained to priesthood, no, to be deacons. That's one of the issues that is entrusted to a committee appointed by the CDF and together with the Pope's approval. And they also will give their study report. So I think it's kept open because they haven't closed. I don't know whether at the end of that study they would say that's also impossible. It's possible for them to say that such ordination is impossible. But that's not the issue at the moment. Your question was, is it still open? It is.
Yes.
Secondly, you said something which I didn't think of, but I think it's there. Did you say married men
Yeah.
being ordained to diaconate?
No, to priesthood.
To priesthood. It didn't come here, but it was mentioned in group discussions. It was mentioned, if I remember, my memory is not that good on that, once or twice in the plenary. But it did surface in 2018 at the Synod for the Amazonia.
Okay.
It came up, married men to be ordained. So this time it didn't come, married men to be ordained to permanent diaconate.
Is already there.
It's already there, but from that to this.
Priesthood. Yeah.
So this time it didn't surface much, but I think that's also a fairly open question. Could I make a controversial statement? After all, I'm into theology. I think, Royan, sometimes when we read the signs of the times are stubborn. I may have my theories, that cannot be, this can. Sometimes signs of the times make us resign to read what the Holy Spirit wants. So in view of that, you never know
Yeah.
the ever-increasing scarcity of vocations, the ever-increasing lack of people to come forward to be ordained, the ever-increasing questioning of whether priesthood should be intrinsically aligned to celibacy. These questions, even if we dogmatically, if you are the Pope, you can say, no, they are closed. You may close them, but Holy Spirit might open them. So even a synod can close them, but Holy Spirit might open them. I'm not talking about this synod, I'm just making a comment.
Yeah.
What was your, before that, I think it was Cardinal Supich of Chicago last year who said, diaconate is for service of the community, like in the Acts of the Apostles. But what has happened in the tradition of the church is, diaconate very often, except the permanent deacons, is a stepping stone for priesthood. Go to a seminary, before they are ordained as priests, at least for 6 months, they are to practice their diaconate. Lumen Gentium already, I think in number 23, I can't remember, Lumen Gentium said, that's Vatican II, diaconate is not to be considered as just paving the way for ordination. It's much richer than that.
Yes.
So that was reaffirmed at this assembly. Last but not least, you were trying to put me into trouble, I think, by asking about LGBTQ issues. If you remember last time, I remember, I have the notes, in the plenary and in small groups, LGBTQ issue was coming up again and again. But in that synthesis report of last year, they never used the terminology LGBTQ. Instead, they used, we should be considerate to some of the questions of people who are differently oriented in their sexuality.
Yeah.
So similarly, this time also,
It did not feature, no.
it didn't feature, but in number 50, instead of that, I think I should take credit. I'm making a public statement. Some of our amendments were taken seriously. Cardinal Tobin is a witness to that, our own Redemptorist. He was in my small group. It was mentioned that we should not forget people who are in the margins of the church. We should reach out to them. That's all, in the draft before the final document. But through my promptings, now I'm trying to be a little bit and the whole group accepted, only the groups could suggest amendments, also privately we could, I wrote privately also. Why not include, and they have taken that very seriously, probably it came from a few other groups also, not only me, maybe others, but for sure I was one of those who suggested. This is the line, Royan, number 50, as a moral theologian. It will be important for you.
Yeah.
It says, many participants were delighted and surprised that they were asked about their views in the synodal journey with regard to the community, etc. Then it says, I'm reading now literally, Unfortunately, others continued to experience the pain of feeling excluded or judged because of their marital situation, divorced and remarried people, single parents, etc.
That's right.
Or of their identity or their sexuality. So it is mentioned,
That's right.
but very vaguely, but those who know, they ought to know to whom this is referred to. This is referring to.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you, Father Vimal. Coming to our final question, what are the implications of this final document on the Synod of Synodality for the Church in Asia? You mentioned earlier that this document is not normative in nature, but it's a set of guidelines. How do you see this document changing the Church in Asia? We both come from Asia. We know how patriarchal, clerical, hierarchical the Church is. What implications does it have for our bishops' conferences in Asia? And how do you see a change? And what would you recommend in terms of the implementation of this final draft?
It's a very loaded question, but you prompted me here to say something which I forgot earlier. You asked for the key issues. One of the key issues was to consider unity as unity in diversity. When you mentioned now Asia, it came to my mind. That also was one of the things some of us insisted upon. So you are asking about Asia, how relevant it would be first of all to Asia. As you know, in Asia, we live within India, Sri Lanka, Japan, except the Philippines and East Timor. In all the other countries in Asia, we are tiny drops of Christians in a vast ocean of non-Christian religions. Other religions will be a better term. Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, these dominate. So there also our cultures, ancient cultures, we live that. As some of the Indian theologians like Father Amaldas, Father Felix Wilfred, these people have been insisting that for us Asians, interreligious dialogue, living with intercultural orientations is not an option. We live that. They also say it's not a speculative thing. In a European country, it may be all pure speculation, but not now, because with immigration and globalization, even these societies, here in Rome, for example, there are so many non-Christians. So, and also non-believers, though they are baptized. So all the more reasons to think of unity of our humanity in their diversity. So this has been stressed again and again, not only within the church, but also in the wider world. In that sense, many of the things the Synod said have a lot of relevance. But what did you ask second? I can't remember.
Yeah, my question is, how do you see this document changing the way the church functions in Asia? Keeping in mind
I get it.
Being very hierarchical,
I get it.
patriarchal,
I
and
get it.
clerical as well.
Clericalist. Yeah, one of the antidotes for clericalism which this Synod gave was, it's in the document in 2 paragraphs. There also some of us were insisting on that because there was a time in the draft clericalism was something very vague. Now it's, some of us formulated it, and it's in the same way it's appearing there. Co-responsibility, lay participation, evaluation of our leaders, etc. These are bound to be antidotes to clericalism, if they are fulfilled. But your question is more pointed. Who has to implement what is said here?
That's right, yeah.
An ordinary layperson in Asia cannot do that. It has to come from the top, because through our cultures, our cultural way of thinking, it has to come from top. In addition to that, many churches in Asia have conditioned our lay faithful to think that they have to decide, they will tell. So in view of that framework, which is still in existence, it's the duty, bounden duty of our shepherds, beginning with the bishops, and the priests, and to a certain extent religious, to launch this synodal way more and more as the document is appealing, as the Pope has been saying for the nth time. So it's a big responsibility for our Asian leadership. I want to, in view of, did you have another questions connected to that?
No, my question is more in terms of
Yeah.
how can we implement
Yeah.
the
Let me say this
proposals
way.
of this document.
Let me say this way. I remember, I think I said it last year when you were interviewing me. Synodality will work or will break down or collapse, depending on two important factors. Number one is a structural change is needed. Ecclesial structures have to change. Most of the things I was telling you, lay participation, all that, they are pointing to that. In fact, there is a canon law study group appointed with regard to this. They are also supposed to give their report
Reports.
in June 2025. So, hopefully I went for that meeting also during the synod, and they are very open-minded. Some changes in canon law, ecclesial structures have to change. Otherwise, what happened to Vatican II teachings will happen here. You know, I am one of those theologians who believe that the beautiful insights, beautiful teachings of Vatican II were killed, yes, killed by the existing structures. Vatican II forgot to make one change of law, change of structures, institutions. Of course, they expected canon law to change that. And canon law was launched, the new code, only in 83, nearly 20 years later. But it has not taken, it's still hierarchical, code of canon law. So, what was I trying to say? Vatican II's beautiful teachings were poured into new wine, poured into old skins, old structures. They absorbed them.
Yeah.
But this time, there is new wine here, but new wine, it's a repetition of Second Vatican Council. Forgotten parts are resurrected, but they need to be poured into new wine skins. Otherwise, same thing that happened to Vatican II will happen. And I can assure you, there won't be no other synodal way in future. They'll make sure that it will not get up again. Those who don't want change. Royan, that means conversion, about which this Pope is talking about again and again. A conversion from an earlier pre-Vatican II ecclesiology of church as hierarchy to church as communion. A church as the people of God, of all the baptized. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I was saying last year was, and I'm repeating, if the synodal process, synodal way is to succeed, what you said, formation. When we say formation, we always think of religious formation, sisters, brothers, or seminary formation. No, formation of all the people of God. This has been said in this document very clearly. But I want to draw your attention to number 141. This is a must, Royan. This is a must. Look at this. There are 3 lines. Number 141. You should read it on the internet. It will be available, this document. Synodality implies a profound vocational and missionary awareness, the source of a renewed way of living, ecclesial relations, and new dynamics regarding participation. It also means, synodality means, adopting the practice of ecclesial discernment and a culture of ongoing evaluation. Last line, these cannot come about unless they are accompanied by focused formation processes. Focused formation processes. Who are going to, what does it mean? It's not seminary formation. You know, how many baptisms you have done now? You are
Yes.
priest for nearly 10, 15 years, no?
20 years.
Oh my God, I remember you as a young seminarian. Right, so that shows I am old. How many baptisms have you done? How many? And after baptism, that is initiation into Christian life, Catholic life. From then onwards, this formation should go on, whether you are going to be a priest or religious or whatever. Lay people, I would say, it's not here, it's here also in very vague terms, catechetical training, our Sunday catechetics. It's good to have the basics of our faith. This is also a basic of our faith. Synodal way of living. Goes to Jerusalem Council, Acts of the Apostles. How many of our catechetical lessons have incorporated synodal way? Because talking about formation, dear Royan, is just a wild dream if you don't initiate them from baptism time. Last point, and then I finish. In number 144, it gives very pointedly where this can happen. I think, my dear readers, dear viewers, this I must read. Only one long line. Where could synodal formation take place? 144. The church already has many places and resources for the formation of missionary disciples. Then it goes to enumerate. Families, small communities, parishes, ecclesial associations, seminaries, religious communities, academic institutions, and also places for serving and working with the marginalized. Then it says, also through popular piety. We Redemptorists, we talk about devotion to our dear Mother of Perpetual Help. How many people are following our novena, especially in Asia?
Yes.
Philippines, Singapore, my country, your country, mine, Bombay. Do we in our preaching talk about synodality? Or is it such an exotic topic, never to be touched? I'm expanding it. Then there's one last line, 146, it says, in addition to specifically pastoral settings and resources, our Christian community has other places. Schools. How many schools we have in the world? How many in India, Sri Lanka? Catholic schools. Vocational training colleges, not only Salesians, but many others. Universities, Catholic universities. So it goes on in 146 to mention few such places where we can use in our instructions. We can include in our instructions also this synodal way of life. So this is one concrete way.
Thank you so much, Father Vimal, for your generosity to take us through these weeks of the Synod on Synodality. We did that last year, and you were very generous to do this year as well.
It's my duty.
For our viewers. And as by way of summarizing all our discussions so far, though the 16th General Assembly of the Synod on Synodality has come to an end, which is on communion, participation, and mission, the Holy Father Pope Francis have paved the way for a synodal church, which is going to be the integral part of being the church today, through prayer, dialogue, listening, discerning, and of course through transparency, accountability. So we pray for a new way of being the church, and we thank our viewers in a very special way for being with us throughout these weeks of the Synod on Synodality. God bless you all.
Also, I think, lest we forget, I should express my gratitude to you, dear Father Royan, and also Father Sanjay, who stepped in during his absence from Rome, for having taken the difficult task of interviewing me, because many are frightened to interview me because they say I jump from one to another and they get disarrayed. But more than that, last but not least, it's certainly not least, I must thank, together with Father Royan, our Redemptorist General-led Communication Center, the Scala News, headed by our dear Father Gregor from Poland, and Father Sanjay Tirki from
India.
So we thank you, all of you, because otherwise we are failing in our duty. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
God bless you.
God bless you.